Chapter 1. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hampton Industries' executive floor, casting long shadows across polished mahogany surfaces. Willow Hampton sat at her father's former desk, now hers, her dark fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, the rich aroma mingling with the subtle scent of leather-bound books and success that permeated the space. At 37, she commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, yet this morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Her PCOS had been particularly challenging lately, the hormonal fluctuations leaving her feeling bloated and self-conscious despite the perfectly tailored burgundy silk blouse that skimmed her curves. She'd chosen the color deliberately, it made her dark skin glow. But even her favorite shade couldn't quite lift the cloud of inadequacy that seemed to follow her everywhere these days. The quarterly projection spread before her told a story of success, but Willow couldn't shake the feeling that she was failing somehow. The numbers were strong, the international expansion plans promising, yet Marshall's voice echoed in her mind from the night before, "You're overthinking again, darling. Maybe you should let the board handle the major decisions while you focus on smaller responsibilities." She touched her engagement ring unconsciously, the substantial diamond catching the morning light. 3 years engaged, and Marshall Novelli still made her feel like she was playing dress-up in her father's office rather than running a multi-million-dollar empire she'd helped build from the ground up. The elevator chimed softly, and Marshall's familiar footsteps echoed across the marble floor. He appeared in her doorway, perfectly groomed as always, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the expensive cafe downstairs. The gesture that had once made her heart flutter now felt routine, calculated. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, though his eyes were already scanning his phone screen rather than looking at her. "Thought you might need the extra caffeine after staying up so late with those reports." Willow accepted the coffee with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you. I wanted to review everything before the board meeting." About that, Marshall settled into the leather chair across from her desk, finally pocketing his phone. "I've been thinking we might want to reconsider some of your expansion proposals. The international market is so unpredictable right now, and with your emotional decision-making style, maybe a more conservative approach would be wiser." The familiar sting of his subtle criticism hit its mark. Marshall had a gift for wrapping his doubts about her capabilities in concern and affection, making her question her own instincts. What she didn't know was that his systematic undermining stemmed from his own deep-seated inadequacy, a man who had never built anything significant himself, threatened by a woman whose natural brilliance eclipsed his calculated mediocrity. "The research supports the expansion, Marshall. The projections are solid." "I'm sure they are, darling. I just worry that you get so passionate about these projects that you might miss potential pitfalls. It's one of the things I love about you, your heart rules your head." His smile was indulgent, paternal. "Perhaps we should have Timothy Sinclair review the proposals? His family's business experience might provide some objective perspective." At the mention of Timothy's name, something fluttered in Willow's chest. A warmth she immediately tried to suppress. Timothy Sinclair had been part of her life for as long as she could remember, their families intertwined through business and friendship spanning decades. He was Harrison Hampton's most trusted ally, and Willow's most valued advisor when it came to complex business decisions. She also happened to have been desperately in love with him when she was 17. The memory hit her suddenly, unbidden. A family dinner at the Sinclair estate, her teenage self stealing glances at Timothy across the table as he discussed international trade policies with her father. He'd been 20 then, already showing signs of the commanding presence he'd grow into, and she'd hung on his every word. Later that evening, during Harrison's birthday celebration, they'd found themselves alone on the garden terrace. Timothy had been telling her about his plans for expanding Sinclair Industries globally, his hazel eyes bright with ambition and dreams, and Willow had felt herself falling deeper with every word. "You're going to change the world," she'd whispered, and for a moment, something had shifted in his expression. He'd stepped closer, his hand reaching toward her face, and Willow's heart had nearly stopped. But then Harrison's laughter had echoed from inside, breaking the spell, and Timothy had stepped back with a careful smile. "You should get back to the party, Willow. Your father will be looking for his favorite daughter." She'd been devastated, convinced he only saw her as Harrison Hampton's little girl, too young and naive to be taken seriously. When she'd left for Harvard the following month, she'd buried those feelings deep, telling herself Timothy Sinclair was out of her league. A brilliant businessman who needed an equally sophisticated partner, not a girl battling teenage insecurities and family expectations. Now, 20 years later, Marshall's suggestion to consult Timothy sent that same flutter through her chest, followed immediately by guilt. She was engaged to Marshall. She had no business feeling anything for Timothy beyond professional respect and family friendship. "That's not necessary," she said carefully. "I'm confident in the analysis." Marshall's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course you are. I just thought." His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with an odd urgency. "Actually, I need to take this. Emergency with the Peterson account." He stepped into the hallway, and Willow caught fragments of his conversation, something about timelines and acceleration. When he returned, his charming smile was back in place, but there was a tension around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Crisis averted," he said lightly. "You know how demanding clients can be." Before Willow could respond, her own phone rang. Timothy Sinclair's name appeared on the screen, and her pulse quickened traitorously. "Timothy," she answered, hoping her voice sounded professionally neutral. "Good morning, Willow." His deep voice carried that familiar warmth that had always made her feel safe. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I have some questions about the international expansion proposal you sent over for review." Her breath caught. She'd sent Timothy the preliminary outline 3 days ago, seeking his insight on the European market entry strategy. His expertise in international business was unmatched, and despite Marshall's subtle discouragements, she'd learned to trust Timothy's judgment above all others when it came to major business decisions. "Not too early at all. Did you have a chance to review the projections?" "I did, and I'm impressed. Your strategy for the German market entry is particularly brilliant. You've identified opportunities that most companies miss entirely. I do have some thoughts on the supply chain logistics that might strengthen the proposal even further. Would you have time for a consultation this afternoon?" The genuine admiration in his voice sent warmth spreading through her chest. When Timothy reviewed her work, she felt like the brilliant businesswoman she'd trained to become rather than the uncertain woman Marshall's constant subtle criticisms had created. "I'd appreciate your insight," she said, acutely aware of Marshall watching her with sharp attention. "Should I come to your office?" "Whatever works best for you. I know you're preparing for your board presentation, so I'm at your disposal." The thoughtfulness, the respect for her schedule and priorities. It was such a stark contrast to Marshall's tendency to expect her to accommodate his needs without question. 2 o'clock at your office would be perfect. I'll have Samuel prepare the conference room. And Willow? His voice softened slightly. Your father would be incredibly proud of this proposal. You've taken Hampton Industries in directions he only dreamed of. The line went dead, leaving Willow staring at her phone with a mixture of professional satisfaction and something deeper she didn't want to name. Timothy's approval meant more to her than any board vote or quarterly profit margin. Timothy Sinclair, Marshall observed, his tone carefully neutral. He certainly seems attentive to your business needs. He's been our family's most trusted advisor for years, Willow replied, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. His insight is invaluable. Of course it is. Marshall's smile didn't reach his eyes. I just hope you're not becoming too dependent on outside opinions. A CEO needs to trust her own instincts, even when they're emotionally driven. There it was again, the subtle undermining disguised as concern. Marshall had perfected the art of making her question every decision, every instinct, every moment of confidence she managed to build. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our Diary of Love. Chapter 2. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, but Willow's attention kept drifting to the afternoon consultation with Timothy. She found herself changing clothes twice, finally settling on a navy dress that hugged her curves in all the right places while maintaining perfect professionalism. She told herself it was about feeling confident for the business discussion, but the flutter in her stomach suggested otherwise. Danny Torres, her executive assistant and closest friend, knocked on her office door at 1:30. "Your car is ready, but I wanted to check, are you okay? You seem distracted today." Willow looked up from her laptop, where she'd been pretending to review notes while actually thinking about hazel eyes and the way Timothy's voice had sounded when he'd called her brilliant. "Just nervous about the presentation," she lied. Danny's dark eyes studied her with the perception of someone who'd been by her side for 5 years. As a fellow Latina woman who had climbed the corporate ladder through determination and brilliance, Danny understood the unique pressures Willow faced as a woman of color in business. She'd also witnessed every subtle way Marshall diminished Willow's confidence. "This is about the consultation with Timothy Sinclair, isn't it?" "It's a business meeting, Danny." "Honey, I've scheduled dozens of your business meetings, and you've never changed outfits twice for any of them." Danny settled into the chair across from Willow's desk, her expression gentle but knowing. "I've also noticed how you light up whenever his name comes up, and how you've been consulting him more frequently lately. He gives excellent business advice." "I'm sure he does. I'm also sure that's not the only reason you value his opinion so highly." Danny leaned forward, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had fought her own battles against men who tried to diminish strong women. "Willow, you're one of the smartest, most capable women I know, but when it comes to your personal life, you sell yourself short. Marshall makes you question every instinct you have, while Timothy makes you remember how brilliant you actually are." The observation hit too close to home. "I'm engaged, Danny. To a man who makes you feel small instead of celebrating how magnificent you are." Danny's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not saying anything should happen with Timothy, but maybe it's worth asking yourself why his opinion matters so much to you." Willow gathered her purse and the presentation materials, trying to ignore the truth in her friend's words. "I need to go. Just, be honest with yourself, okay? You deserve to be with someone who sees your worth without you having to prove it constantly." The drive to Sinclair Industries gave Willow 20 minutes to wrestle with Danny's words and her own traitorous feelings. Timothy had always seen her potential, even when she was 17 and insecure about everything from her appearance to her intelligence. He'd encouraged her to pursue her MBA, had celebrated her early successes at Hampton Industries, and had never once made her feel like her medical condition defined her worth. Unlike Marshall, who managed to work her PCOs into conversations as a limitation, her emotional fluctuations affecting her decision-making, her health challenges making certain stresses inadvisable, her body's struggles being something he nobly overlooked because he loved her despite her flaws. The Sinclair Industries building rose 40 stories into the afternoon sky, its glass and steel exterior reflecting the bustling energy of the financial district. Willow had been here countless times over the years, but today her heart was racing as she rode the elevator to the executive floor. Samuel Root, Timothy's business partner and closest friend, greeted her in the reception area with his usual warm smile. "Willow, beautiful as always. Timothy's waiting in the conference room, he's been looking forward to this consultation all week." The comment sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Has he really?" Samuel's knowing look suggested he saw more than he was saying. "That man has incredible respect for your business acumen. I've never seen him study anyone's proposals as thoroughly as he studies yours. Between you and me, I think he sees something special in your strategic thinking that goes beyond professional admiration. The conference room was Timothy's private sanctuary, with rich mahogany surfaces, leather chairs, and windows overlooking the city. Timothy stood at the far end of the room, his back to the door as he studied documents laid out on the table. At 40, he'd grown into the commanding presence she'd glimpsed in his younger years, broad shoulders filling out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, dark hair showing just the first hints of silver at the temples. When he turned to greet her, those hazel eyes that had haunted her teenage dreams met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Willow," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, warmer, more intimate than mere friendship should allow. "Thank you for making time for this." "Thank you for reviewing the proposal so thoroughly," she replied, hoping he couldn't hear the slight tremor in her voice. Timothy moved to pull out her chair, his hand briefly touching her shoulder as she sat down. The simple contact sent electricity through her silk dress, and she had to concentrate on breathing normally. "Your expansion strategy is exceptional," he began, settling into the chair beside her rather than across the table. "The market analysis for Germany is particularly insightful. You've identified consumer patterns that most American companies overlook entirely." As he spoke, leaning forward to point out specific sections of her proposal, Willow became hyper-aware of everything about him. The subtle scent of his cologne, the way his hazel eyes focused intently on her work, the warmth of his body close enough that she could feel it through the space between them. "The only concern I have," Timothy continued, "is the timeline for the supply chain establishment. European logistics can be more complex than the projections suggest." He reached across her to indicate a specific chart, his arm brushing against hers. The contact was brief, professional, but it sent heat racing through her veins. When he glanced up to meet her eyes, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of awareness that suggested he'd felt it too. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence, the business proposal forgotten. Timothy's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, and Willow's heart thundered against her ribs. She began, then lost her words entirely. Timothy cleared his throat and leaned back, putting professional distance between them. "Perhaps we should review the financial projections for the second quarter implementation." The spell broken, Willow forced herself to focus on the papers before them, but her awareness of Timothy remained acute. Every time he spoke, every gesture, every moment when their eyes met, it all felt charged with the tension of things unspoken. They worked for 2 hours, his insights proving invaluable as always. Timothy's questions were incisive, his suggestions brilliant, and by the end of the session, Willow's proposal had evolved into something even stronger than what she'd brought. "This is going to be transformational for Hampton Industries," Timothy said as they finished. "Your board would be foolish not to approve this unanimously." The genuine pride in his voice made her glow with satisfaction. "I couldn't have refined it without your input. You could have, and you would have. I just helped you see what was already there." His hazel eyes were serious, intense. "You're extraordinary at this, Willow. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The words hit her like a physical caress. Marshall's constant subtle criticisms had made her doubt her capabilities, but Timothy's unwavering confidence in her abilities made her remember who she truly was. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For believing in me. For seeing." She paused, struggling to find words that wouldn't reveal too much. "For seeing potential where others see problems." Timothy's expression grew soft, almost tender. "Anyone who sees problems when they look at you is blind, Willow." The intensity in his voice made her pulse race. They were venturing into territory that had nothing to do with business, and she should stop it, should remember her engagement ring and her obligations. But sitting here in this room with Timothy, feeling seen and valued and appreciated, she couldn't bring herself to care about anything except the way he was looking at her. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Marshall is expecting me for dinner." Something flickered across Timothy's features at the mention of her fiancé, disappointment, perhaps, or frustration. Of course. I hope the presentation goes well tomorrow. As Willow gathered her materials, Timothy moved to help her with her coat. His hands lingered on her shoulders as he settled the fabric around her, and she could feel his warmth through the silk lining. "Willow," he said quietly, his voice close to her ear. "If you ever need anything, business advice, a friendly ear, anything at all, I hope you know you can call me." She turned within the circle of his arms, suddenly close enough to see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Because." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might actually answer honestly. But then he stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place. "Because Hampton Industries' success is important to me." The careful response stung, even though she knew it was probably for the best. She was engaged. This couldn't be anything more than business friendship, no matter what her heart was begging her to feel. "Thank you again for your insight," she said formally. "Always a pleasure, Willow." As she walked toward the elevator, Willow could feel Timothy watching her leave. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to ask the questions that had been burning in her chest for 20 years, to find out if the connection she felt was real or just her imagination. But Marshall was waiting at her apartment, and she was wearing his ring, and some doors were better left unopened. Even if closing them felt like suffocating. Chapter 3. The drive back to her apartment should have given Willow time to compose herself, but instead, every mile seemed to intensify the confusion swirling in her chest. Timothy's words echoed in her mind, not just his praise for her business acumen, but the way he'd said her name, the tenderness in his voice when he told her anyone who saw problems when looking at her was blind. Marshall was waiting in her living room when she arrived, having used his key to let himself in. He'd made himself comfortable on her cream-colored sofa, his laptop open, take-out containers from their usual restaurant spread across her coffee table. "There's my brilliant CEO," he said without looking up from his screen. "How was your meeting with Sinclair?" "Productive," Willow replied carefully, hanging her coat in the closet. His insights helped strengthen the proposal significantly. "I'm sure they did." Marshall's tone carried an edge she couldn't quite interpret. "He certainly seems invested in your success." Willow moved to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine, needing something to calm the nervous energy Timothy's proximity had created. "Timothy's been a family friend for decades, Marshall. Of course he wants Hampton Industries to succeed." "Of course," Marshall agreed, but when she returned to the living room, his eyes were studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "You seem energized." "Consultation with Sinclair always seems to have that effect on you." The observation felt like an accusation, and Willow's defensive walls shot up. "I'm energized because I'm confident about tomorrow's presentation. Timothy helped me identify some potential issues and strengthen the proposal." "Naturally. The man does have a reputation for being thorough." Marshall closed his laptop and patted the sofa beside him. "Come here, darling. You've been working too hard lately." Willow settled beside him, accepting the glass of wine he'd poured for her. Marshall's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his side, but instead of comfort, she felt trapped. His cologne, once pleasant, now seemed cloying compared to the subtle sophistication of Timothy's scent. "I've been thinking about our wedding planning," Marshall said, his fingers playing with her engagement ring. "Maybe we should consider a longer engagement. You're under so much stress with the business expansion, and planning a wedding on top of that might be overwhelming for you." "I'm not overwhelmed," Willow protested. "I'm perfectly capable of managing both." "Of course you are, sweetheart. I just worry that you're taking on too much. Your PCOS symptoms have been more noticeable lately, and stress can exacerbate those hormonal imbalances. Maybe we should focus on your health and the business for now." The familiar sting of his concern-disguised criticism hit its mark. Marshall had a talent for making her medical condition sound like a character flaw, something that limited her capabilities rather than a manageable health issue that millions of women navigated successfully. What he carefully concealed was his own strategy. Keeping Willow feeling inadequate made her less likely to question his own mediocrity. "My PCOS is under control, Marshall." "I'm sure it is, but I've noticed you've been more emotional lately. Yesterday you got upset over that supplier contract, and today you seemed almost flustered after your meeting with Sinclair." His thumb traced over her ring finger. "I just think taking things slowly might be wise." Flustered. The word made her stomach clench, because it was accurate. Timothy did fluster her, in ways that had nothing to do with her medical condition and everything to do with 20 years of suppressed attraction. "I wasn't flustered," she lied. Marshall's smile was indulgent, patronizing. "Of course not, darling. I'm probably imagining things." They ate dinner in relative silence, Marshall occasionally making comments about his day while scrolling through his phone. Willow found herself comparing his distracted attention to the focused intensity Timothy had given her that afternoon, the way he'd listened to every word she said as if her opinions were the most important things in the world. "I need to return some calls," Marshall announced after they'd finished eating. "Business crisis with the Peterson account." He disappeared into her study, closing the door behind him, and Willow could hear the murmur of his voice through the walls. What she couldn't hear were the details of his conversation with Brittany Cross, his secret accomplice and lover, about accelerating their timeline for extracting Hampton Industries' most valuable trade secrets. Her phone chimed with a text message from Danny. "How did the consultation go? And please tell me you didn't let Marshall's negativity get in your head again." Willow stared at the message, her friend's perceptiveness unsettling. Danny had worked for Hampton Industries since Willow had taken over from her father, and in those 5 years, she'd witnessed every interaction between Willow and Marshall. Her disapproval of the engagement had grown more obvious over time, though she tried to mask it with professional courtesy. It went well. Timothy's insights were invaluable as always. "And how are you feeling about tomorrow's presentation?" "Confident. The proposal is stronger than ever." "Good. Trust your instincts, Willow. You're brilliant, and the board knows it." Willow set her phone aside, but Danny's words lingered. Trust your instincts. When had she stopped doing that? When had Marshall's constant subtle criticisms made her second-guess every decision, every feeling, every moment of confidence? Marshall emerged from the study an hour later, his expression troubled. "Crisis averted, but barely. I may need to fly to Chicago tomorrow to handle the Peterson situation in person." "Tomorrow?" "But the board presentation." "I know, darling, and I'm sorry. I wanted to be there to support you, but this situation requires immediate attention." He pulled her into his arms, but his embrace felt perfunctory. "You'll be fine without me. You have all that excellent advice from Sinclair to fall back on." Again, the mention of Timothy's name carried an odd undertone. Willow pulled back to study Marshall's face. "Is something wrong? You've been acting strange about Timothy all evening." "Have I?" Marshall's expression was carefully neutral. "I suppose I just wonder sometimes if you rely on his input too heavily. A CEO needs to develop independent judgment. Timothy doesn't make my decisions for me, Marshall. He provides perspective and insights that help me make better decisions. I'm sure that's how you see it." Marshall's smile was tight. "I just hope his interest in your success is purely professional." The implication hit her like a slap. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing specific. I just notice how he looks at you sometimes, how attentive he is to your needs. The man is 40 and unmarried, Willow. Perhaps his motivations aren't as altruistic as you believe." Heat flooded Willow's cheeks, part anger, part guilt, because Marshall's observation wasn't entirely wrong. Timothy did look at her sometimes with an intensity that had nothing to do with business, and this afternoon she'd felt the pull of attraction that transcended professional consultation. Timothy is a family friend who respects my professional abilities, she said firmly. If you're suggesting otherwise, I'm not suggesting anything, Marshall interrupted smoothly. I'm simply observing that you seem to value his opinion more highly than your own fiancé's. The accusation hung in the air between them, and Willow realized with uncomfortable clarity that it was true. She did trust Timothy's judgment more than Marshall's, did seek his approval more eagerly, did feel more validated by his praise than by Marshall's calculated compliments. That's not fair, she said weakly. Isn't it? Marshall stepped closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. When was the last time you asked for my advice on a business decision? When was the last time you seemed as excited about my opinion as you do about Sinclair's? Guilt twisted in her stomach, because she couldn't answer those questions honestly without admitting truths she wasn't ready to face. She didn't seek Marshall's business advice because he consistently made her doubt herself. She didn't get excited about his opinions because they usually centered around her limitations rather than her potential. I value your support, Marshall. But not my insight. Not the way you value his. Marshall's thumbs traced along her collarbone, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt possessive instead. Sometimes I wonder if you're still that 17-year-old girl with a crush on Timothy Sinclair. The words hit their target with devastating accuracy. Willow's breath caught, her face burning with humiliation and recognition. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've never quite gotten over your teenage infatuation. Marshall's voice was gentle, understanding, but his words were surgical strikes designed to wound. It's understandable, really. He's successful, distinguished, and he's never challenged you the way a real partner should. Of course that feels appealing when you're struggling with stress and health issues. Struggling. Health issues. The words made her PCOS sound like a disability rather than a manageable condition. Made her sound weak and incapable rather than resilient and accomplished. I don't have a crush on Timothy, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, they felt like lies. Marshall's smile was sad, sympathetic. I hope not, darling, because that would be incredibly hurtful to our relationship. But more importantly, it would be embarrassing for you. A successful CEO pining after a family friend who's never shown romantic interest. It wouldn't reflect well on your professional judgment. The cruelty of the comment was wrapped in such gentle concern that it took Willow a moment to recognize the emotional manipulation. Marshall was using her deepest insecurities, her fear of professional embarrassment, her uncertainty about her own attractiveness, her worry that Timothy only saw her as Harrison Hampton's daughter, as weapons against her. Timothy respects me, she said quietly. I'm sure he does. The question is whether that respect extends beyond professional courtesy. Marshall pressed a kiss to her forehead, the gesture feeling more like a claim than affection. I love you, Willow, including your tendency to romanticize relationships that are probably more one-sided than you realize. He left her standing in the living room, claiming he needed to prepare for his Chicago trip, and Willow sank onto the sofa with her wine glass, her mind reeling. Was Marshall right? Was she still harboring teenage fantasies about Timothy? Had she misread the connection she'd felt during their consultation? The worst part was that she couldn't entirely dismiss his accusations. She did seek Timothy's approval more eagerly than she should. She did feel more attractive and competent when he looked at her with those hazel eyes full of admiration. She had spent the entire afternoon hyper-aware of his proximity, his scent, his voice saying her name like a caress. But was that one-sided? Had she imagined the electricity when their arms brushed? The way his gaze had dropped to her lips? The intensity in his voice when he'd told her anyone who saw problems when looking at her was blind? Her phone buzzed with another text from Danny. Stop overthinking whatever Marshall said to make you doubt yourself. You know your worth, even when he tries to make you forget it. The message was eerily perceptive, and Willow wondered if her emotional turmoil was that obvious to everyone around her. She typed back, how do you know Marshall said something? Because you always get that same defeated look after spending time with him. He has a gift for making you feel small. He's trying to protect me. From what? Success? Confidence? Believing in yourself? Willow stared at the phone, Danny's words hitting uncomfortably close to home. Marshall did seem to find fault with every moment of confidence she managed to build, every success she achieved, every decision she made independently. I need to focus on tomorrow's presentation. You need to trust that you're exactly as brilliant as you've always been. With or without Timothy's validation, with or without Marshall's approval. Your worth isn't dependent on anyone else's opinion. Chapter 4. After Marshall left for the airport the next morning, Willow found herself with unexpected freedom to prepare for the board presentation without his constant subtle criticisms. She dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit that made her feel powerful and professional, her father's vintage watch gleaming on her wrist like a talisman. The presentation went flawlessly. Every question the board asked, she answered with confidence and precision. The insights Timothy had provided proved invaluable, but more importantly, she felt like herself again, capable, intelligent, worthy of the leadership role she'd earned. Exceptional work, Willow, her father said afterward, his pride evident in every word. The European expansion is exactly the kind of innovative thinking Hampton Industries needs. I couldn't be more proud. Harrison Hampton's approval meant everything to her. At 75, he remained one of the most respected figures in international business, and his genuine admiration for her strategic thinking validated years of hard work and preparation. The board voted unanimously to approve the proposal, authorizing the funding and timeline she'd requested. As the members filed out of the conference room, offering their congratulations, Willow felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with anyone else's validation and everything to do with her own competence. You should celebrate, Harrison said, gathering his notes. This is a significant achievement. I think I will, Willow agreed, and for the first time in months, she felt genuinely happy with her professional accomplishments. She called Timothy from her office, wanting to share the news with the person who'd helped make it possible. Willow, he answered on the first ring, and the warmth in his voice made her smile. How did the presentation go? Unanimously approved. The board was incredibly supportive, and the funding has been authorized. That's fantastic. Congratulations. The genuine excitement in his voice made her glow with pride. I knew they'd recognize the brilliance of the proposal. I couldn't have done it without your insights. Thank you for taking the time to review everything so thoroughly. It was my pleasure. Truly. There was a pause, and when Timothy spoke again, his voice was softer. You should be proud of yourself, Willow. This expansion is going to transform Hampton Industries. I am proud, she admitted, surprised by how good it felt to say the words without qualification or self-doubt. Good. You should be. And you should celebrate properly, this is a major achievement. Marshall's in Chicago on business, so I'll probably just have a quiet dinner at home. Another pause, longer this time. That seems like insufficient celebration for such a significant success. Willow laughed. What would you suggest? Dinner. Somewhere elegant enough to match the importance of the occasion. Timothy's voice carried a note of something she couldn't quite identify. If you'd like company, that is. I'd be honored to help you celebrate. The invitation sent heat spiraling through her chest. Dinner with Timothy, just the two of them, celebrating her success. It felt dangerous and thrilling and exactly what she wanted. That's very kind of you to offer, she said carefully. It's not kindness, Willow. It's recognition of an extraordinary achievement by an extraordinary woman. The way he said it, the reverence in his voice, the absolute conviction, made her feel beautiful and powerful and worthy in a way Marshall's compliments never had. I'd love to have dinner with you, she heard herself saying. Excellent. 8 o'clock at Velvet Oasis? I'll make reservations. Velvet Oasis was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where business deals were celebrated and important announcements were made. The kind of place Marshall had never taken her, claiming it was too expensive for casual dining. That sounds perfect. I'll pick you up at 7:30. Timothy, you don't need to, I want to, he interrupted gently. Please let me do this properly. The word properly sent shivers down her spine, suggesting layers of meaning she didn't dare examine too closely. All right. I'll see you at 7:30. After hanging up, Willow sat at her desk for several minutes, staring at her engagement ring and trying to convince herself this was simply a business celebration between old friends. But the flutter in her stomach and the warmth spreading through her chest suggested otherwise. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. What did one wear to dinner with Timothy Sinclair? How did she navigate an evening that felt loaded with possibilities she shouldn't be considering? By 6 o'clock, she'd given up on productivity and headed home to prepare. She stood in her closet for 20 minutes, rejecting outfit after outfit as either too casual, too obvious, or too revealing. Finally, she settled on a deep emerald dress that skimmed her curves without being overtly seductive, the color making her dark skin glow with warmth. As she applied her makeup, Willow caught herself taking extra care with her appearance in a way she hadn't done in months. When had she stopped trying to look beautiful for Marshall? When had their relationship become so routine that she no longer bothered with the small details that made her feel attractive? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marshall. Hope the presentation went well. We'll call tonight to hear all about it. Guilt twisted in her stomach as she typed back, went perfectly. Celebrating with colleagues tonight, we'll talk tomorrow. It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. Timothy was a colleague, in the broadest sense, and they were celebrating her success. But the flutter in her chest when his name appeared on her doorman's call list suggested this evening was about much more than professional achievement. When the elevator opened to reveal Timothy waiting in her building's elegant lobby, Willow's breath caught. He was devastating in a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence, his hazel eyes warming as they took in her appearance. You look absolutely stunning, he said, and the reverence in his voice made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Thank you, she managed, hyper-aware of his hand at the small of her back as he guided her toward the waiting car. The drive to Velvet Oasis was filled with conversation about her presentation, Timothy asking thoughtful questions about the board's response and her timeline for implementation. But underneath the professional discussion, Willow was intensely aware of everything about him, the way his fingers drummed against his knee, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Velvet Oasis was everything she'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, intimate lighting, tables positioned for privacy and important conversations. The maitre d' greeted Timothy by name, leading them to a corner table with stunning city views. This is incredible, Willow said as Timothy helped her into her chair. Nothing less than you deserve, he replied, settling across from her. Today's success represents years of hard work and brilliant strategy. That deserves recognition. As they ordered dinner and wine, Willow found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. Timothy's complete attention, his genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings, his obvious pride in her accomplishments, it was intoxicating after Marshall's constant subtle undermining. Tell me about the European timeline, Timothy said over their appetizers. What's your biggest concern about the implementation? They discussed business for the first hour, Timothy's insights proving as valuable as always. But gradually, their conversation shifted to more personal topics, family expectations, the pressures of running generational businesses, the loneliness that sometimes came with leadership positions. I worry sometimes that I'm not living up to my father's legacy, Willow admitted over their main course. He built Hampton Industries from nothing, and I'm terrified of being the generation that ruins everything he worked for. Timothy's expression grew serious. Your father built a successful company, but you're transforming it into something revolutionary. Harrison created a solid foundation, but you're building an empire. There's a difference. Marshall thinks I take too many risks. Something flickered across Timothy's features at the mention of her fiancé. What kind of risks? Emotional decision-making, he calls it. He thinks I get too passionate about projects and lose objectivity. And what do you think? The question surprised her. Marshall never asked what she thought about his observations, he presented them as facts to be accepted rather than opinions to be discussed. I think passion and emotion can be strengths in business, not just weaknesses. Some of my best decisions have come from trusting my instincts rather than relying purely on data. I agree completely. Timothy's hazel eyes were intense, focused entirely on her face. The most successful leaders I know trust their intuition. Passion drives innovation, and emotional intelligence creates better relationships with clients and employees. Marshall worries that my PCOS affects my emotional stability. Timothy's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. In what way? Hormonal fluctuations, he says. Making me more reactive, less rational during certain times of the month. The words felt humiliating to speak aloud, but Marshall had said them so often that she'd begun to believe them. That's ridiculous, Timothy said flatly. PCOS is a medical condition that millions of successful women manage every day. It doesn't affect intelligence, judgment, or leadership ability. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either ignorant or deliberately undermining your confidence. The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty that her medical condition didn't define her worth or capabilities, made tears spring to her eyes. When had anyone besides Danny defended her so fiercely? Marshall says he's trying to protect me. From what? Success? Believing in yourself? Timothy's voice was carefully controlled, but she could see anger simmering beneath the surface. Willow, you're one of the most brilliant businesswomen I've ever known. Your instincts are exceptional, your strategy is innovative, and your leadership inspires loyalty. Anyone trying to convince you otherwise has ulterior motives. The fierce declaration made her heart race. Timothy saw her as brilliant, capable, worthy, everything Marshall's subtle criticisms had trained her to doubt about herself. Why? She whispered. Why what? Why do you believe in me so completely? Why do you see things in me that others don't? Timothy was quiet for a long moment, his hazel eyes searching her face. Because I've been watching you grow into the extraordinary woman you are for 20 years. I've seen your strength, your intelligence, your compassionate heart. I've watched you overcome every challenge and exceed every expectation. His voice grew softer, more intimate. Anyone who doesn't see your worth is blind, Willow. The intensity in his voice, the way he was looking at her, made her pulse thunder in her ears. They were venturing into territory that had nothing to do with business friendship and everything to do with the attraction that had been simmering between them for decades. Timothy, she began, not sure what she intended to say. I know, he said quietly. I know you're engaged. I know this complicates everything. But I can't sit here listening to you doubt yourself based on someone else's criticism without telling you the truth. What truth? His hazel eyes held hers steadily. That you're magnificent exactly as you are. That your passion and emotion and instincts are strengths, not weaknesses. That any man lucky enough to be with you should be celebrating your brilliance, not trying to diminish it. The words hung between them, loaded with implications that made her breath catch. Timothy wasn't just defending her professional capabilities, he was questioning Marshall's treatment of her, suggesting she deserved better than subtle criticism disguised as concern. Marshall loves me, she said weakly. Does he? Because love should make you feel more confident, not less. Love should celebrate your successes, not find fault with your methods. Love should see your worth without you having to prove it constantly. Each word hit like a physical blow, because Timothy was describing everything her relationship with Marshall lacked. When had Marshall last celebrated her success without qualification? When had he looked at her with the kind of admiration Timothy was showing her right now? "I should go," she whispered, terrified of the emotions swirling in her chest. "Should you? Or do you feel like you should because someone has trained you to run from anything that makes you feel good about yourself?" The observation was so accurate it took her breath away. She did feel guilty for enjoying Timothy's company, for basking in his admiration, for feeling beautiful and brilliant and worthy under his gaze. This isn't fair to Marshall. What isn't fair is the way he makes you question every instinct you have. What isn't fair is making you feel like your medical condition defines your worth. What isn't fair is convincing a woman as extraordinary as you that she should settle for less than she deserves. Timothy's passionate defense of her worth made tears spill over, because no one had ever fought for her like this. No one had ever seen her value so clearly and declared it so fiercely. "You barely know me anymore," she protested. "We see each other for business consultations and family gatherings. You can't know. I know that you've tripled Hampton Industries' revenue in 5 years. I know that you've maintained every employee while expanding internationally. I know that you treat your staff with respect and kindness while demanding excellence. I know that you still volunteer at the Literacy Center every month despite your impossible schedule." Timothy's voice was soft but certain. "I know that you're compassionate and brilliant and strong, and that watching you doubt yourself based on someone else's limitations breaks my heart." The revelation that he'd been paying such close attention to her life, that he knew details about her volunteer work and leadership style, made her pulse race. Timothy had been watching her, seeing her, valuing her in ways Marshall never had. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Timothy reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. The contact sent electricity through her entire body, and she saw his breath catch as he felt it too. "Because you deserve to know how extraordinary you are. Because watching someone systematically destroy your confidence is unbearable. Because..." He paused, his thumb tracing over her knuckles. "Because I've been in love with you since you were 17 years old, and I can't watch you settle for less than you deserve anymore." The confession hit her like lightning, illuminating everything she'd wondered about and feared and hoped for over the past 20 years. Timothy loved her. Had always loved her. The connection she'd felt wasn't one-sided imagination, it was 2 decades of suppressed mutual attraction finally being acknowledged. "Timothy," she breathed, her world tilting on its axis. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you're engaged. I know I should have told you years ago instead of watching from the sidelines while you chose someone else." His hazel eyes were intense, desperate. "But I couldn't let you marry him without knowing that someone sees your worth completely." Willow stared at their joined hands, her engagement ring catching the candlelight like an accusation. Everything she'd believed about her relationship with Timothy was shifting, realigning, revealing truths she'd been afraid to acknowledge. "I thought you only saw me as Harrison's daughter. As someone to protect because of family friendship. I do want to protect you. But not because you're Harrison's daughter, because you're the woman I love, and watching someone hurt you is agony." Timothy's voice was raw with honesty. "I've wanted to tell you for years, but you seemed happy with Marshall, and I didn't want to complicate your life." "Happy?" She laughed bitterly. "Marshall makes me feel small and uncertain and inadequate. He finds fault with every decision I make and treats my medical condition like a character flaw." "Then why are you with him?" The question hung in the air between them, and Willow realized she didn't have a good answer. Comfort? Convenience? Fear of being alone? Or had Marshall's systematic undermining of her confidence made her believe she didn't deserve better? "I don't know," she admitted. Timothy's thumb continued its gentle caress across her knuckles, and Willow felt herself drowning in the hazel depths of his eyes. 20 years of wondering, of suppressed attraction, of believing herself unworthy of his love, and here he was telling her she'd been wrong about everything. "What happens now?" she whispered. That's up to you, Timothy said gently. But whatever you decide, I need you to know that you're worthy of love that celebrates you, not love that diminishes you. You deserve someone who sees your brilliance and encourages it, not someone who makes you doubt yourself. The restaurant around them faded away, leaving only Timothy's intense gaze and the warmth of his hand covering hers. For the first time in years, Willow felt seen, valued, cherished in a way that had nothing to do with what she could provide and everything to do with who she truly was. The future stretched before her, filled with impossible choices and consequences she couldn't predict. But in this moment, with Timothy's love confession reverberating through her heart and his fingers intertwined with hers, she finally understood what it felt like to be truly seen by someone who loved her completely. Share with us in the comments. Have you ever had someone see your worth when you couldn't see it yourself? We'd love to hear how love helped you discover your true value. Chapter 5. The drive home from Velvet Oasis passed in a haze of conflicted emotions and earth-shattering revelations. Timothy had loved her for 20 years. 20 years. While she'd convinced herself he only saw her as Harrison's daughter, he'd been watching her with the eyes of a man desperately in love. While she'd settled for Marshall's calculated affection and subtle undermining, Timothy had been waiting, believing her happy, respecting her choices even as they broke his heart. Timothy walked her to her apartment door, the tension between them so thick it was almost tangible. Every brush of his fingers against hers as he helped her from the car, every moment their eyes met, every breath they shared in the elevator, it all felt charged with the electricity of truth finally spoken. "Thank you for dinner," Willow said softly as they stood outside her door, her keys trembling in her hand. "And for everything you said." Timothy's hazel eyes searched her face in the hallway's soft lighting. "I meant every word, Willow. You deserve to know how extraordinary you are." "I don't know what to do with that information," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do anything tonight. Just, don't let anyone convince you that you're less than magnificent." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then dropped to his side with visible restraint. "Whatever you decide about us, about Marshall, about your future, make sure it's what you truly want, not what someone else has convinced you to accept." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her completely. For a moment, Willow imagined closing the distance between them, finally acting on 20 years of suppressed attraction. But Marshall's ring felt heavy on her finger, a reminder of obligations and complications she wasn't ready to face. "Good night, Timothy." "Good night, beautiful." The endearment, spoken with such reverence, followed her into her apartment and haunted her dreams. She woke the next morning feeling like she was inhabiting someone else's life. Everything looked the same, her elegant bedroom, her carefully chosen furniture, her designer clothes hanging in perfect order, but everything felt different. Timothy's confession had shifted the foundation of her reality, making her question every assumption she'd built her adult life upon. Marshall called while she was having coffee, his voice cheerful and familiar through the phone. "Good morning, darling. How did the presentation go yesterday?" "Very well. The board approved the expansion unanimously." "That's wonderful. I knew you'd do beautifully." His praise felt hollow compared to Timothy's fierce pride. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there to support you." "It's fine. I managed perfectly well on my own." "Of course you did. Though I'm sure having Sinclair's input helped with your confidence." There it was again, the subtle suggestion that her success wasn't entirely her own, that she needed external validation to function effectively. Yesterday, the comment might have made her doubt herself. Today, after Timothy's passionate defense of her capabilities, it felt like psychological manipulation. "My confidence comes from preparation and competence, Marshall, not external input." A pause. "Of course it does. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise." His tone shifted slightly, becoming more careful. "Did you celebrate? I hope you didn't spend the evening alone." Guilt twisted in her stomach. "I had dinner with colleagues." Anyone I know? The question felt loaded, suspicious in a way that made her defensive. Does it matter? Not at all. I just like to know who you're spending time with when I'm away. Marshall's voice was light, reasonable, but there was an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. You sound different today. More energized. Because someone reminded me that I'm extraordinary instead of systematically tearing down my confidence, she thought but didn't say. I'm excited about the European expansion. Naturally. When will I see you? I should be back this afternoon. I have meetings all day. Perhaps dinner tomorrow? Perfect. I'll make reservations somewhere special to celebrate your success properly. After hanging up, Willow sat in her kitchen staring at her engagement ring and wondering when Marshall's attention had started feeling suffocating rather than caring. When had his interest in her activities become surveillance rather than genuine concern? The workday provided welcome distraction from her emotional turmoil. Hampton Industries was buzzing with excitement about the European expansion, and Willow found herself energized by her team's enthusiasm. For the first time in months, she felt like the confident leader she'd trained to become rather than the uncertain woman Marshall's constant subtle criticisms had created. Danny appeared in her office doorway at lunchtime, carrying takeout containers and wearing an expression of barely contained curiosity. Okay, spill, she said, settling into the chair across from Willow's desk. You look like a completely different person today. I don't know what you mean. You're glowing. You're sitting up straighter. You've smiled more this morning than you have in the past month combined. Danny's dark eyes were knowing. Something happened last night, and I'm guessing it had nothing to do with colleague celebrations. Willow tried to maintain her professional composure, but Danny had known her too long and too well. The presentation went well. I'm feeling confident about the expansion. The presentation was yesterday afternoon. This glow is from last night. Danny leaned forward. Please tell me you finally realized what everyone else has known for years. What's that supposed to mean? That you're in love with Timothy Sinclair and have been since you were a teenager. That Marshall makes you feel small while Timothy makes you remember how incredible you are. That you've been settling for comfortable mediocrity when you could have passionate, devoted love. The accuracy of Danny's observations took Willow's breath away. I'm engaged, Danny. To the wrong man, and you know it. Marshall treats you like an employee he's obligated to manage rather than a woman he adores. Timothy looks at you like you hung the moon. Danny's voice softened. What happened last night? Willow found herself telling Danny everything, the dinner, the conversation, Timothy's confession, her own confused emotions. Speaking the words aloud made the reality of the situation both more concrete and more overwhelming. He's been in love with you for 20 years, Danny repeated when Willow finished. 20 years, Willow. While you were convincing yourself you weren't good enough for him, he was watching you and falling deeper in love with the woman you were becoming. It doesn't matter. I'm engaged to Marshall. Why? The question was blunt, challenging. Not why you got engaged, I know you were flattered by his attention and tired of being alone. But why are you still engaged? What is Marshall giving you that makes you want to spend your life with him? Willow opened her mouth to list Marshall's positive qualities, then realized she couldn't think of any that weren't surface level or practical. Security. Companionship. The comfort of not being alone. But love? Joy? The feeling of being cherished and celebrated and understood? He's stable, she said weakly. So is a savings account, but you don't marry one. Danny's expression was gentle but firm. Willow, you deserve someone who loves you the way Timothy does. Someone who sees your worth without you having to prove it constantly. Marshall loves me. Does he? Or does he love having access to your success, your family's connections, your father's respect? Danny had never voiced such direct criticism of Marshall before, and her honesty was brutal. When was the last time he made you feel beautiful? When was the last time he supported one of your decisions without finding fault? When was the last time he looked at you the way Timothy did at your father's birthday party? The memory hit Willow suddenly. Harrison's 75th birthday celebration 6 months ago. She'd worn a blue dress that made her feel confident and attractive, and she'd caught Timothy watching her across the room with such intensity that her breath had caught. Marshall, meanwhile, had spent the evening networking with other guests and pointing out that her dress was a bit snug around her hips. "This is impossible," Willow whispered. "No, it's not. It's terrifying and complicated and potentially life-changing, but it's not impossible." Danny reached across the desk to squeeze her hand. "You just have to decide what kind of life you want. One where you're constantly managing someone else's ego and doubting your own worth, or one where you're cherished for exactly who you are." Before Willow could respond, her phone rang. Timothy's name on the screen made her pulse accelerate, and Danny's knowing smile confirmed that her reaction was obvious. "Take it," Danny said, gathering the lunch containers. "And stop overthinking everything. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind is afraid to acknowledge." "Timothy," Willow answered, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I hope I'm not interrupting your day. I wanted to follow up on our conversation last night." Just the sound of his voice made her feel warm and valued and seen. "It's not an interruption. I've been thinking about what I said, and I realized I may have put you in an impossible position. That wasn't my intention. You told me the truth. I'm grateful for that, even if it's complicated." "It doesn't have to be complicated, Willow. I'm not asking you to make any decisions about us. I just needed you to know that someone sees your worth completely." Timothy's voice was gentle, patient. "Whatever you choose for your future, make sure it's based on what brings you joy, not what feels safe or expected." The echo of Danny's words made her smile despite her emotional turmoil. "How did you know I needed to hear that today?" "Because I know you. I know you're probably analyzing every possible outcome and consequence instead of trusting your instincts." There was warmth in his voice, affection that made her heart race. "Your instincts are excellent, by the way. They always have been." "Marshall says my emotions make me unreliable." The silence on Timothy's end was so complete she wondered if the call had dropped. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Marshall is wrong. Your emotional intelligence is one of your greatest strengths as a leader. He says my PCOS affects my judgment." "Willow." Timothy's voice was sharp now, almost angry. "PCOS is a medical condition that has absolutely nothing to do with your intelligence, judgment, or emotional stability. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either ignorant or deliberately manipulating you." The fierce defense of her worth made tears spring to her eyes. "Why do you believe in me so completely when I can't even believe in myself anymore?" "Because I've been watching you for 20 years, and I've seen every challenge you've overcome, every success you've achieved, every moment of grace under pressure. Because I know the woman you are when someone isn't systematically destroying your confidence." Timothy's voice softened. "You're extraordinary, Willow. You always have been. I wish I could see myself the way you see me. You can. You just have to stop listening to voices that make you doubt your worth and start trusting the people who celebrate it." That evening, instead of going home to face another night of Marshall's psychological warfare, Willow found herself at Grace Sinclair's elegant home in the hills. Timothy's mother had called that afternoon, ostensibly to invite Willow to help plan a charity fundraiser, but Willow suspected there was more to the invitation. Grace Sinclair was a force of nature, a woman who had built her own successful interior design firm while raising 3 children and managing the social obligations that came with being married to a prominent businessman. At 72, she remained vibrant and sharp, with silver hair that caught the light like spun platinum and eyes the same hazel shade as her son's. "Darling girl," Grace said, embracing Willow warmly as she arrived. "You look radiant. Success suits you. Grace's home was a masterclass in elegant comfort, with rich fabrics, carefully curated art, and enough family photographs to tell the story of 3 generations of Sinclairs. Willow had always felt welcome here, almost like an honorary daughter. "Thank you for inviting me," Willow said, accepting a glass of wine as they settled in Grace's sitting room. "Though I suspect this isn't entirely about charity planning." Grace's smile was knowing. "You always were perceptive." "No, darling, I wanted to talk to you about something much more important." She leaned forward, her expression serious but loving. "I want to talk to you about my son." Willow's breath caught. "Grace, let me finish, dear. I've watched Timothy love you from afar for 20 years. I've seen him light up when your name is mentioned, seen him find excuses to be wherever you are, seen him turn down countless wonderful women because none of them were you." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "I've also watched you settle for a man who doesn't appreciate the treasure he has." Marshall Novelli is a small, insecure man who makes himself feel important by diminishing an extraordinary woman. Grace's voice carried steel beneath the silk. "I've watched him systematically undermine your confidence for 3 years, and it's been heartbreaking." The blunt assessment took Willow's breath away. "You've been watching?" "Darling, when you care about someone the way I care about you, you notice everything. I've noticed how you seem smaller when Marshall is around, how you second-guess yourself after spending time with him, how you've stopped laughing the way you used to." Grace reached over to take Willow's hand. "But I've also noticed how you bloom when Timothy is near, how confident you become when he believes in you, how you remember who you truly are." "It's complicated, Grace. Love is always complicated, dear. But some complications are worth it, and others are simply obstacles to happiness." Grace's hazel eyes, so like Timothy's, were intense. "Willow, you are like a daughter to me. I would never interfere in your life without good reason. But I cannot stand by and watch you marry a man who doesn't see your worth when my son has loved you devotedly for 2 decades. Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," Grace said softly. "You've always known. You're just afraid to trust yourself because someone has spent 3 years convincing you that your instincts are unreliable. What if I'm wrong? What if I ruin everything? What if you're right? What if choosing love over comfort changes everything for the better?" Grace handed her a tissue. "Darling girl, I've lived 72 years, and I've learned that the only regrets that truly matter are the chances we don't take." They talked until nearly midnight, Grace sharing stories about her own marriage, about watching her children find love, about the difference between settling and soaring. When Willow finally left, she felt like she'd been given permission to want more than she'd ever dared to dream. Chapter 6. 2 days later, Marshall arrived at her apartment for their long-postponed dinner, carrying flowers and wearing his most charming smile. But instead of feeling pleased by the gesture, Willow found herself analyzing his motivations. Were the flowers genuine affection, or calculated manipulation designed to soften her up for whatever criticism he was planning to deliver about her expansion timeline? "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek with the same perfunctory affection he'd shown for months. "Thank you." The compliment felt empty, routine, nothing like the reverence in Timothy's voice when he'd called her stunning. Over dinner at an expensive restaurant Marshall had chosen, not to celebrate her success, she realized, but to impress her with his sophisticated taste, he began his subtle assault on her confidence. "I've been thinking about your European expansion," he said over their appetizers. "The timeline seems aggressive, perhaps unrealistically so." The board approved the timeline unanimously. "The market research supports the projections." "I'm sure it does, darling, but boards can be swayed by charismatic presentations rather than practical concerns." Marshall's smile was indulgent, patronizing. Sometimes an outside perspective can identify potential problems that passion might obscure. There it was, the suggestion that her passion was a liability rather than a strength, that her successful presentation was manipulation rather than competence. "What specific problems do you see?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Marshall launched into a detailed critique of her expansion strategy, finding fault with everything from her market entry approach to her staffing projections. Each criticism was wrapped in concern and affection, but the cumulative effect was devastating to her confidence. 6 months ago, Willow would have accepted his critique and modified her plans accordingly. Tonight, with Timothy's words fresh in her memory and her own worth finally clear in her mind, she recognized Marshall's behavior for what it was: systematic psychological manipulation designed to make her doubt herself. "I disagree," she said quietly when he finished his litany of concerns. Marshall's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I'm sorry. I disagree with your assessment. The timeline is realistic, the market research is thorough, and the projections are conservative. The board approved the plan because it's sound, not because I manipulated them. Of course the plan is sound, darling. I'm simply suggesting that some modifications might make it even stronger." Marshall's voice carried a note of surprise, as if her disagreement was unexpected. "Your emotional investment in the project might be affecting your objectivity. My emotional investment is exactly what makes the project strong. Passion drives innovation, and my instincts about this market are excellent." Willow met his gaze steadily. "I'm not modifying a plan that the board approved unanimously based on unfounded concerns." The silence stretched between them, and Willow could see Marshall recalibrating his approach. She'd never directly challenged his criticism before, never defended her judgment so firmly. "I'm just trying to protect you from potential failure," he said finally, his voice gentle but his eyes calculating. "You know how emotional you get when projects don't go according to plan, especially when your PCOS symptoms are affecting your stability." The familiar weapon, her medical condition used as evidence of her inadequacy. But tonight, instead of making her doubt herself, it made her angry. "My PCOS has never affected my professional judgment or emotional stability. It's a manageable medical condition that millions of successful women navigate daily." Her voice was calm but firm. "I won't accept it being used to question my competence anymore." Marshall's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something harder. "I'm not questioning your competence, Willow. I'm concerned about your well-being." "No, you're not. You're undermining my confidence because it serves your purposes somehow." The words were out before she could stop them, 20 years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "Every success I achieve, you find fault with. Every decision I make, you question. Every instinct I trust, you suggest is unreliable. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you celebrated an achievement of mine without finding something to criticize? When was the last time you supported a decision without suggesting modifications? When was the last time you made me feel intelligent and capable instead of emotional and unstable?" Marshall's careful mask was slipping, revealing calculation beneath the charm. "I think your stress levels are affecting your perception of our relationship. My stress levels are fine. My perception is finally clear." Willow set down her wine glass, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. "I think we need to postpone the wedding." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Marshall's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, calculation, before settling on wounded concern. "Willow, darling, you're obviously overwrought. This expansion has been more stressful than you realized, and you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months." She removed her engagement ring, the diamond that had once felt like security now feeling like a shackle. "I need time to figure out what I want from a relationship, and what I'm willing to accept. This is about Sinclair, isn't it?" Marshall's voice was sharp now, the careful control finally cracking. "I knew his influence over you was becoming problematic. This is about me remembering my own worth." "Your worth?" Marshall laughed, but there was no humor in it. Willow, you're a 37-year-old woman with a medical condition that affects your fertility and emotional stability. Your biological clock is ticking, and your options are limited. I've accepted your flaws because I love you, but that doesn't mean other men will be so understanding. The cruelty of the words hit her like a slap, but instead of crumbling, Willow felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard certainty. This was who Marshall really was. A man who used her deepest insecurities as weapons, who saw her medical condition as the cruelty of the words hit her like a slap, but instead of crumbling, Willow felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard certainty. This was who Marshall really was, a man who used her deepest insecurities as weapons, who saw her medical condition as a character defect, who believed she should be grateful for his tolerance rather than deserving of his love. Then I suppose I'll find out, she said quietly, standing from the table. Goodbye, Marshall. She walked out of the restaurant with her head high and her heart racing, Marshall's angry voice calling after her. For the first time in 3 years, she felt free. The freedom was terrifying. The freedom was exhilarating. The freedom was exactly what she needed to remember who she truly was. As she drove home through the city lights, Willow thought about Timothy's patient love, his unwavering belief in her worth, his fierce defense of her capabilities. She thought about the woman she'd been before Marshall's systematic destruction of her confidence, and the woman she could become if she chose to trust her own instincts again. Tomorrow would bring complications and consequences she couldn't predict. Tonight, she was simply a woman who had finally remembered her own worth. It was a beginning. Chapter 7. The morning after ending her engagement dawned gray and drizzling, matching Willow's emotional state perfectly. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between relief at finally standing up for herself and terror at the uncertainty stretching ahead. Marshall had called 6 times and sent a dozen texts, alternating between apologies and accusations, but she'd turned off her phone after reading his message claiming she was having an emotional breakdown due to hormonal imbalances. Even in defeat, he couldn't resist undermining her mental stability. Danny took one look at Willow's bare ring finger when she arrived at the office and immediately closed the door behind her. Please tell me you finally came to your senses, she said, settling into the chair across from Willow's desk with obvious concern. I ended the engagement last night. The words felt surreal, like admitting to something she'd only dreamed about doing. Thank God. Danny's relief was palpable. How are you feeling? Terrified. Liberated. Confused. Like I just jumped off a cliff without knowing if there's water below. Willow rubbed her temples, fighting off a stress headache. Marshall said some things that were enlightening about his true feelings. Such as? Willow repeated Marshall's parting words about her age, medical condition, and limited options. Speaking them aloud made their cruelty even more apparent, and she saw Danny's expression darken with each phrase. That bastard, Danny said flatly. He's been systematically destroying your self-worth for 3 years, and when you finally stand up for yourself, he tries to convince you that you're lucky to have him? He's despicable. He's not entirely wrong, though. I am 37 with PCOS. Dating at this age isn't exactly, stop. Danny's voice was sharp. Don't you dare let his poison take root in your mind again. You're a brilliant, successful, beautiful woman who happens to have a manageable medical condition. Any man would be lucky to have you. Before Willow could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Hampton, your father is here to see you. Harrison Hampton entered with his usual commanding presence, but his expression was troubled. At 75, he remained sharp as a blade, and Willow could see him assessing her emotional state with paternal concern. Danny, would you give us a moment? He asked gently. After Danny left, Harrison settled into the chair she'd vacated, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Marshall called me this morning. Willow's stomach dropped. What did he tell you? That you'd had some kind of breakdown and called off the engagement in an emotional state. He seemed quite concerned about your mental stability. Harrison's dark eyes, so like her own, studied her face carefully. He suggested I encourage you to seek professional help for what he called PCOS-related emotional volatility. The fact that Marshall had tried to weaponize her father against her was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. And what did you tell him? I told him that if my daughter ended their engagement, she had excellent reasons that had nothing to do with emotional instability. Harrison's voice carried steel beneath the gentleness. I also told him that if he contacted me again with such insulting suggestions about your mental health, he'd be hearing from our attorneys. Relief flooded through Willow so powerfully that tears sprang to her eyes. You believe me? Darling girl, I've watched you build this company into something extraordinary while managing every challenge life has thrown at you. Your judgment is impeccable, your emotional intelligence is exceptional, and your strength is inspiring. Harrison leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. If you ended the engagement, it's because Marshall wasn't worthy of you, not because you were having some kind of breakdown. He said my options are limited. That I should be grateful someone was willing to accept my flaws. Harrison's expression darkened. Marshall Novelli is a small man who tried to make himself feel important by diminishing an extraordinary woman. Your worth has nothing to do with your age, your medical condition, or anyone else's opinion of your options. How did you know he was wrong for me? Because he never made you happy. Comfortable, perhaps. Secure in a surface way. But never joyful. Harrison's smile was sad but knowing. I've been waiting 3 years for you to realize you deserve better. Why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to discover your own worth, not have it dictated by your father. Though I'll admit, watching him systematically undermine your confidence has been excruciating. They talked for another hour, Harrison sharing observations about Marshall's behavior that Willow had been too close to see clearly. His subtle competitiveness with her successes, his tendency to redirect conversations away from her achievements, his way of making her doubt decisions that others praised. The European expansion is brilliant, by the way, Harrison said as he prepared to leave. Timothy was right to encourage you to trust your instincts on the market analysis. Timothy encouraged the expansion. He called me yesterday to express his admiration for your strategy. Said it was some of the most innovative thinking he'd seen in international business. Harrison paused at the door. That man has always seen your potential clearly, even when you couldn't see it yourself. After her father left, Willow sat in her office trying to process the revelation that Timothy had praised her work to Harrison. Not to win points or gain advantage, but simply because he genuinely admired her capabilities. The contrast with Marshall, who found fault with every success, was staggering. Her phone buzzed with a text from Timothy, "I hope you're having a good morning. No pressure to respond, just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you." The simple message, free of demands or expectations, made her smile for the first time all day. She typed back, "It's been eventful. I could use some of that clarity you mentioned. Coffee? I'm free whenever works for you. Now would be perfect." They met at a small cafe near Hampton Industries, tucked away from the business district where they were less likely to encounter professional acquaintances. Timothy was waiting in a corner booth when she arrived, rising to greet her with an expression of such gentle concern that her composure nearly cracked. "You look exhausted," he said softly, helping her into her seat. "I ended my engagement last night." Timothy went very still, his hazel eyes searching her face. "Are you all right?" "I'm terrified and relieved and completely uncertain about the future." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, needing the warmth. "But I finally remembered that I deserve better than constant criticism disguised as concern." "What happened?" Willow found herself telling Timothy everything: the dinner, Marshall's systematic critique of her expansion plans, his use of her PCOS as a weapon, his final cruel words about her limited options. Timothy listened without interruption, but she could see anger building in his expression with each detail. He used your medical condition to question your professional judgment? Timothy's voice was carefully controlled, but his hands were clenched into fists on the table. Among other things. He seemed to think I should be grateful that someone was willing to overlook my flaws. Your flaws? Timothy's laugh was bitter. Willow, you're one of the most remarkable women I've ever known. PCOS isn't a flaw, it's a medical condition that millions of successful women manage every day. Your age isn't a limitation, it's evidence of your experience and wisdom. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either ignorant or deliberately cruel. Marshall said my options are limited at 37. Marshall is an idiot. Timothy's voice was fierce. You could have any man you wanted, at any age, because you're extraordinary. Any man who doesn't see that isn't worth your time. The passionate defense of her worth made warmth spread through her chest. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? Because I've been watching you for 20 years, and I know who you really are beneath the doubt someone else created. Timothy reached across the table to cover her hands with his. You're brilliant, compassionate, strong, and beautiful. You deserve someone who celebrates those qualities, not someone who uses your vulnerabilities as weapons. What if Marshall was right about my judgment being compromised? What if I made the wrong decision? Do you feel like you made the wrong decision? Willow considered the question honestly. Despite her fear and uncertainty, she felt lighter than she had in months. Free to trust her instincts, make her own choices, remember her own worth. No, she admitted. I feel like I finally made the right one. Then trust that feeling. Your instincts are excellent, Willow. They always have been. As they talked, Timothy's thumb traced gentle patterns across her knuckles, and Willow found herself drowning in the hazel depths of his eyes. The connection between them felt different now, no longer forbidden, no longer complicated by her engagement to another man. What happens now? She asked softly. Whatever you want to happen. I meant what I said the other night, I'm not pressuring you for anything. You've just ended a 3-year relationship, and you need time to process that. Timothy's voice was patient, understanding. But I want you to know that my feelings haven't changed. If anything, watching you find the strength to choose yourself has made me love you more. The declaration made her pulse race. Timothy. I know it's complicated. I know the timing isn't ideal. But I've waited 20 years to tell you how I feel, and I don't want to waste any more time pretending this connection between us doesn't exist. I don't want to pretend anymore either, she whispered. Timothy's breath caught, his fingers tightening around hers. What are you saying? I'm saying that ending my engagement was about more than just refusing to accept less than I deserve. It was about finally being free to want what I've always wanted but was too afraid to reach for. And what's that? You, she said simply. I've been in love with you since I was 17, Timothy. I convinced myself you only saw me as Harrison's daughter, so I settled for someone who made me feel safe instead of someone who made me feel alive. The confession hung between them, 20 years of suppressed truth finally spoken aloud. Timothy's expression was a mixture of joy, relief, and something that looked like reverence. You've made me feel alive every day for 20 years, he said softly. Every consultation, every family gathering, every moment I got to be near you. It was the highlight of my existence. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you seemed happy with Marshall, and I didn't want to complicate your life with my feelings. Timothy's thumb continued its gentle caress across her skin. I convinced myself that watching you from a distance was enough, that your happiness mattered more than my own. I wasn't happy. I was comfortable, which I thought was the same thing. Willow turned her hand in his, interlacing their fingers. But comfortable isn't enough anymore. I want to feel cherished and celebrated and understood. I want to feel beautiful and intelligent and worthy. You are all of those things, Timothy said with absolute conviction. You always have been. The cafe around them faded away, leaving only Timothy's intense gaze and the warmth of his hand holding hers. 20 years of wondering, of suppressed attraction, of believing herself unworthy of his love, and here he was telling her she'd been wrong about everything. "I should probably take some time before starting something new," she said reluctantly. "Process the end of my engagement, figure out who I am without Marshall's constant criticism." "You should take all the time you need," Timothy agreed. "But Willow? You don't need to figure out who you are. You need to remember who you've always been, the confident, brilliant, beautiful woman I fell in love with when you were 17. Help me remember," she whispered. Timothy's hazel eyes darkened with an intensity that made her pulse race. "It would be my honor." Chapter 8. For 3 blissful weeks, Willow and Timothy navigated their new relationship while she established herself as a confident single woman. But their peaceful bubble was about to be shattered by a betrayal that went deeper than either of them had imagined. During this time, Willow experienced what it truly meant to be cherished. Timothy didn't rush her or pressure her. Instead, he courted her with the patience and reverence of a man who had waited 20 years for this opportunity. Their first official date was to the art museum, where Timothy listened with genuine interest as Willow shared her thoughts on contemporary sculptures. At dinner afterward, he asked about her work, her dreams, her volunteer activities at the literacy center, not to find flaws or offer unsolicited advice, but because everything about her fascinated him. "You light up when you talk about helping those kids learn to read," Timothy observed over dessert. "It's beautiful to watch." The comment made Willow glow with pleasure. When had Marshall ever noticed what made her passionate? When had he ever looked at her with such obvious admiration for who she was as a person? Their second date was a cooking class, where Timothy proved to be charmingly terrible at knife work but an excellent sous chef. When Willow laughed at his lopsided vegetable cuts, he didn't sulk or deflect, he joined in her laughter and asked her to teach him proper technique. "I love hearing you laugh," he said as they worked side by side. "You have the most beautiful laugh in the world." By their third date, a jazz concert where Timothy held her hand throughout the performance, Willow was beginning to understand the difference between being tolerated and being treasured. "You smell divine," Timothy murmured against her ear during a slow song, his lips brushing her neck with reverent tenderness. "Like vanilla and sunshine and everything I've ever dreamed of." The word sent shivers through her entire body. Marshall had never spoken to her with such poetry, such obvious desire wrapped in complete respect. It was after the concert, when Timothy walked her to her apartment door with careful restraint despite the obvious desire in his eyes, that Willow made her decision. "Would you like to come up?" she asked softly. Timothy's breath caught. "Willow, are you sure?" "I don't want you to feel pressured, I'm sure," she interrupted gently. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a revelation that redefined Willow's understanding of intimacy. Timothy made love to her with such reverent passion, such obvious worship of her body and soul, that she finally understood what she'd been missing. "You're so beautiful," he whispered against her skin, his hands tracing her curves with genuine appreciation. "Every inch of you is perfect." When insecurity about her cause-affected body tried to surface, Timothy's obvious desire and whispered endearments chased every doubt away. "Don't hide from me," he said softly when she tried to cover herself. "You're magnificent, Willow. Let me show you how magnificent." In Timothy's arms, Willow discovered that true intimacy wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, the complete acceptance and celebration of every part of her being. "I love you," she whispered afterward, her voice full of wonder. "I love you too," Timothy replied, holding her close. "I've loved you for so long I can't remember what it felt like before." During these weeks, the cultural elements of their relationship naturally emerged. At a family barbecue at the Hampton estate, Willow watched Timothy interact with her extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins who represented the full spectrum of African American experience. He listened to her Uncle Jerome's stories about the civil rights movement with genuine respect, asked thoughtful questions about her cousin Maya's work as a pediatric nurse, and praised her Aunt Patricia's famous cornbread with sincere appreciation. "Your family is incredible," Timothy told her later. "The love and strength in this house is extraordinary." "They like you," Willow observed with surprise. "Uncle Jerome doesn't usually warm up to people so quickly." "Maybe he can see how much I love you," Timothy said simply. Similarly, when Willow attended the Sinclair family's monthly dinner, she found herself seamlessly integrated into conversations about business, politics, and family history. Grace Sinclair had clearly paved the way, but Timothy's obvious pride in having Willow by his side made every family member treat her not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. "You know," Timothy's sister Caroline confided during dessert, "I've never seen my brother this happy. He glows when he talks about you." These moments of family integration felt natural, right, as if Willow and Timothy had always been meant to be together. The professional partnership between their companies also evolved during this time. While they maintained separate businesses, respecting both family legacies, they began consulting on projects where their expertise complemented each other. "Your insights on sustainable supply chains could revolutionize our European expansion," Willow said during one late-night strategy session in Timothy's home office. "And your market analysis approach could help us identify opportunities in emerging economies," Timothy replied. "We work well together." It was more than professional compatibility, it was intellectual partnership, each challenging the other to think bigger, dream larger, achieve more. The weeks also brought continued education about PCOS, both for Willow and Timothy. When Willow had a particularly difficult day with symptoms, Timothy researched nutritional approaches that might help, attended her doctor's appointment for support, and never once made her feel like her condition was a burden. "PCOS affects millions of successful women," he said when Willow apologized for needing to cancel a dinner date due to fatigue. "You managing this condition while building an empire makes you even more extraordinary, not less." This attitude, treating her medical condition as simply another aspect of her life to navigate together, was revolutionary after years of Marshall's subtle shame and blame. But most importantly, these 3 weeks allowed Willow to rediscover herself. Without Marshall's constant undermining, her natural confidence returned. She made business decisions without second-guessing herself, trusted her instincts about people and opportunities, and remembered that her emotional intelligence was a strength, not a weakness. "You're blooming," Danny observed one afternoon. "It's like watching you become yourself again." "I feel like myself again," Willow agreed. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." Chapter 9. The morning of October 15 shattered their peaceful world with devastating force. Willow's phone rang at 6:30 a.m. with an urgent call from Danny. Reality crashed back as her assistant's panicked voice filled Timothy's quiet bedroom. "Willow, you need to get to the office immediately. There's been a massive security breach in the European expansion files, and the board is calling an emergency meeting." Ice filled Willow's veins as she sat up in bed, immediately alert. "What kind of security breach?" "Someone accessed the confidential market analysis and client lists. IT says the breach came from Marshall's company credentials, but he's claiming his accounts were hacked." Danny's voice was tight with worry. "There's more. Competitors are already making moves based on information that was in those files. Davidson International announced a European expansion this morning that mirrors our strategy exactly." Timothy, who had been listening with growing alarm, was already reaching for his clothes. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, he told Danny before Willow could respond. The drive to Hampton Industries was tense and silent, both of them understanding the implications. If Marshall had stolen confidential information and sold it to competitors, it wasn't just corporate espionage, it was a calculated attempt to destroy everything Willow had worked to build. "He knew," Willow said suddenly, her voice hollow with realization. "All those dinner conversations where he criticized the expansion timeline and projections. He wasn't trying to protect me from failure, he was gathering intelligence to sabotage the entire project. Timothy's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his jaw set with fury. How long has he had access to your confidential files? 3 years. Since we got engaged, I gave him executive-level clearance because I trusted him. The word trusted tasted bitter now. He's been in meetings where we discussed strategy, had access to my computer system, knew every detail of our plans. That son of a, Timothy caught himself, glancing at her apologetically. I'm sorry. I know this is devastating. Don't apologize, Willow said quietly. I think I just realized that Marshall never loved me, he loved having access to Hampton Industries' success. I was his inside source. The emergency board meeting was already in session when they arrived. Harrison Hampton's face was grim as he gestured for Willow to take her seat at the head of the conference table, while Timothy took his position as an advisory consultant. The situation is worse than we initially thought, Harrison announced. Marshall Novelli used his access credentials to steal not just the European expansion plans, but also our client contracts, supplier agreements, and financial projections for the next 5 years. Board member after board member shared devastating news. 3 major clients, Steinberg Holdings, Rodriguez International, and Chen Enterprises, had already been contacted by competitors offering identical services at significantly reduced rates. 2 key suppliers had been approached with insider information about Hampton Industries' negotiation strategies and upcoming contract renewals. The European expansion that had been approved unanimously was now in jeopardy. Meridian Trading Group launched their European initiative this morning, reported board member Janet Rodriguez. Their market entry strategy is nearly identical to ours, down to the specific cities and partnership approaches. Davidson International announced a parallel expansion 30 minutes ago, added another member. They're using our supplier network and client targeting methodology. The legal department is preparing criminal charges for corporate espionage and trade secret theft, Harrison continued. But the immediate concern is damage control and strategic response. What are our options? Willow asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. We can delay the European expansion indefinitely, implement new security protocols, and hope to rebuild client confidence over time, offered board member Thomas Chen. The financial impact would be significant, but we could weather it. Or, Timothy said quietly from his advisory position, we accelerate the timeline and launch before the competitors can fully utilize the stolen information. The room fell silent. Harrison looked between his daughter and Timothy, understanding passing between them. Explain, Harrison said. Timothy stood, moving to the presentation screen with the confidence of a man who had built his own empire from strategic thinking. Marshall stole information, but he doesn't understand Willow's vision the way we do. The stolen data shows what Hampton Industries planned to do, not how brilliantly Willow planned to execute it. As Timothy outlined an aggressive counter-strategy, Willow felt her confidence returning. This was why she had always trusted his business acumen, he saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. Marshall gave them our roadmap, but not our innovation, Timothy continued. If we move fast enough, we can establish European partnerships before the competitors understand what they're really competing against. They have our plans, but they don't have Willow's relationships, her strategic insights, or her ability to adapt and innovate in real time. The timeline would be extremely aggressive, Willow said, her mind already working through logistics. We'd need to move the launch up by 4 months and completely restructure our implementation approach. Can we do it? Harrison asked, his eyes moving around the table to gauge board sentiment. Willow looked at the faces around the conference table, these people who had supported her vision, believed in her leadership, trusted her with their investments. Then she looked at Timothy, whose faith in her abilities had never wavered. Yes, she said with growing conviction. We can do it. And we can do it better than anyone trying to copy our stolen plans. The vote was unanimous. Hampton Industries would accelerate their European expansion, launching a full-scale offensive that would establish market dominance before their competitors could even understand what they were really competing against. Chapter 10. The next 8 weeks were the most intense of Willow's professional life. Working 18-hour days, coordinating with international partners, rebuilding security protocols, and launching the most ambitious expansion in Hampton Industries' history should have been overwhelming. Instead, it was exhilarating. With Marshall's constant criticism removed from her life and Timothy's unwavering support anchoring her confidence, Willow rediscovered the brilliant strategist she'd always been. Her instincts were sharp, her decisions swift and effective, her leadership inspiring. "You're magnificent to watch," Timothy told her one evening as they worked side by side in her office, surrounded by international contracts and partnership agreements. "This is who you've always been, a force of nature in business." The legal proceedings against Marshall moved forward with devastating efficiency. The evidence of his corporate espionage was overwhelming. Emails to competitors, copied files, financial records showing payments from rival companies, even recorded conversations where he had discussed selling Hampton Industries secrets. But the revelation that shattered Willow's remaining illusions came during a deposition when Marshall's medical records were subpoenaed as part of the character assessment. "Ms. Hampton," the attorney said, calling her into his office for a private consultation. "There's something you need to know about Mr. Novelli's medical history." Willow sat across from the lawyer, bracing herself for more evidence of Marshall's deception. "He's had azoospermia for 8 years, the attorney informed her quietly. "Complete absence of sperm production. He's been medically sterile since before you met him." The words hit Willow like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't process the magnitude of Marshall's cruelty. "He knew," she whispered. According to his medical records, he was diagnosed at age 29 after a routine fertility screening. "He's known about his condition for the entirety of your relationship." The cruelty of Marshall's deception was breathtaking. For 3 years, he had let her believe that her PCOS was the reason they couldn't conceive, had used her fertility concerns as evidence of her inadequacy, had made her feel defective and broken, all while knowing he was the one who was sterile. When Timothy found her in the law office parking lot 20 minutes later, sitting in her car and staring at nothing, he immediately knew something devastating had happened. "Willow?" He opened her car door and knelt beside her. "What's wrong?" She told him everything, her voice hollow with shock and grief. Not grief for Marshall, but grief for the years she'd spent believing herself fundamentally flawed. Timothy's reaction was volcanic. "He let you blame yourself for 3 years, Timothy said, his voice shaking with rage. "He watched you struggle with feelings of inadequacy about your body, your worth, your femininity, and he said nothing. The worst part is that I started to believe I was fundamentally flawed," Willow admitted. "He convinced me that my PCOS made me less of a woman, less deserving of love, less capable of being a complete partner." Timothy pulled her into his arms right there in the parking lot, holding her with fierce protectiveness. "You are perfect exactly as you are. PCOS doesn't define your worth, your femininity, or your capacity for love. Marshall is a sociopath who used your deepest insecurities as weapons. I wasted 3 years believing his lies. You survived 3 years of psychological abuse and came out stronger," Timothy corrected firmly. "You recognized your worth, chose yourself, and built something extraordinary. That's not waste, that's triumph." That evening, Timothy arranged for Willow to meet with Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the country's leading fertility specialists and PCOS researchers. The consultation was enlightening and empowering. PCOS affects 1 in 10 women of reproductive age, Dr. Chen explained in her warm, professional manner. "It's a manageable endocrine condition that responds well to lifestyle modifications and medical support. Many women with PCOS have successful pregnancies and fulfilling lives." "Marshall made it sound like I was broken," Willow admitted. "You're not broken," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You have a medical condition that requires informed management, just like diabetes or thyroid disorders. The shame and inadequacy you've been made to feel have nothing to do with medical reality and everything to do with emotional manipulation. The doctor provided Willow with comprehensive resources, dietary recommendations, and a treatment plan that focused on overall health rather than deficiency. For the first time in years, Willow felt educated and empowered about her own body. "Thank you," she told Timothy as they left the appointment, "for helping me reclaim my understanding of my own health." "Thank you for trusting me to be part of your healing," Timothy replied, kissing her forehead with gentle reverence. Chapter 11. The European expansion launched on December 1 and exceeded every projection. Within 6 weeks, Hampton Industries had secured partnerships that positioned them as the dominant player in 4 key markets. The competitors who had tried to use Marshall's stolen information found themselves scrambling to catch up with innovations they hadn't understood and relationships they couldn't replicate. Meridian Trading Group is already scaling back their European plans, Harrison reported during the year-end board meeting. Davidson International has quietly withdrawn from 3 markets where we've established dominance. The launch party was held at the city's most prestigious venue, with international clients, partners, and industry leaders celebrating Hampton Industries' strategic brilliance. Willow moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, every conversation confirming that her instincts had been flawless. The evening also served as an opportunity to showcase the seamless professional partnership between Hampton Industries and Sinclair Corporation. While maintaining their separate identities and family legacies, the 2 companies had developed complementary strategies that enhanced both organizations. "Your sustainable logistics approach revolutionized our supply chain," one German partner told Willow. "And Mr. Sinclair's renewable energy insights helped us exceed our environmental targets." Timothy appeared at her elbow as she finished a discussion with the European market director, offering her a glass of champagne and a smile that made her pulse race. "How does it feel to be the most brilliant woman in the room?" he asked quietly. "It feels like coming home to myself," she replied honestly. "Good. Because I have something to ask you." Before Willow could respond, Timothy was dropping to one knee in the middle of the celebration, pulling a ring box from his jacket pocket. The room fell silent, conversation stopping as everyone turned to witness the moment. "Willow Hampton," Timothy said, his voice carrying clearly across the space, "you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. Your brilliance inspires me, your strength humbles me, and your love completes me. I have waited 20 years to be worthy of you, and I want to spend the rest of my life celebrating everything that makes you magnificent." The ring was perfection. A stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique, chosen specifically to reflect Willow's distinctive style rather than conventional expectations. "Will you marry me?" Timothy asked, his hazel eyes bright with love and certainty. "Yes," Willow said through tears of joy. "Yes, absolutely yes." The room erupted in applause as Timothy slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her with passionate reverence. This was what engagement was supposed to feel like. Celebration, not obligation. Joy, not compromise. Grace Sinclair was crying openly, Harrison Hampton beamed with paternal pride, and Danny was taking pictures while wiping away her own tears. 20 years, Timothy whispered against her lips. 20 years of loving you, and now I get forever. Chapter 12. Marshall's trial began in February and concluded with a decisive guilty verdict on all counts. The evidence was overwhelming. Corporate espionage, trade secret theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud. The prosecution painted a clear picture of a calculated scheme spanning 3 years. Mr. Novelli used his intimate relationship with Ms. Hampton to gain access to proprietary information, which he then systematically sold to competitors, the prosecutor stated during closing arguments. This wasn't opportunistic theft, it was a premeditated plan to exploit trust for financial gain. The trial revealed the full extent of Marshall's calculated cruelty, not just to Willow but to other women he had manipulated over the years. 2 former girlfriends testified about similar patterns of psychological manipulation and professional exploitation. Marshall was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for corporate espionage and fraud, with additional civil penalties that would bankrupt him for decades. Justice felt complete. Brittany Cross, his accomplice and secret lover, received a lighter sentence in exchange for testimony, but her career in marketing was effectively over. The industry had little tolerance for those who betrayed client confidentiality for personal gain. "It's finished," Willow told Timothy after the sentencing. "He can't hurt anyone else now." "How do you feel?" Timothy asked, holding her close in the courthouse hallway. "Free," she said simply. "Completely, finally free." The months following the trial were a period of continued healing and growth. Willow worked with a therapist who specialized in recovering from psychological abuse, learning to recognize and counter the negative thought patterns Marshall had instilled. Emotional abuse leaves invisible scars, Dr. Rodriguez explained during one session. Healing requires actively replacing the critic's voice with your own authentic self-knowledge. Timothy attended several sessions to better understand how to support Willow's healing process. His willingness to learn and grow alongside her deepened their emotional intimacy even further. "I want to be the best partner I can be for you," he told her after one particularly intense session. "Your healing is important to me because you're important to me, not just the successful parts, but all of you." The PCO's education continued as well. Willow worked with Dr. Chen to develop a comprehensive health plan that included nutrition, exercise, stress management, and medical support. Timothy educated himself about the condition, attending appointments and advocating for Willow when needed. "PCOS isn't something wrong with you," Dr. Chen reminded Willow during a follow-up appointment. "It's a hormonal variation that affects many successful, healthy women. With proper management, there's no reason you can't live exactly the life you want." More importantly, Willow and Timothy began exploring fertility options together. Unlike her experience with Marshall, this journey was based on hope, education, and mutual support rather than shame and blame. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," Timothy assured her before their first fertility consultation as a couple. "Our worth isn't determined by reproductive outcomes." Chapter 13. The wedding planning process became a celebration of authentic partnership. Unlike her previous engagement, where Marshall had opinions about everything but investment in nothing, Timothy was genuinely excited about every detail. "What do you think about having the ceremony in my mother's garden?" Timothy suggested one evening as they reviewed venue options. "The pavilion where we almost kissed 20 years ago? The symbolism was perfect." Starting their marriage in the place where their love story had begun, surrounded by both families who had watched their connection grow over decades. Grace Sinclair threw herself into wedding planning with the joy of a woman who had waited 20 years to see her son marry the love of his life. But she was careful to include Willow in every decision, treating her as a beloved daughter rather than an in-law. "I've dreamed of this day since Timothy was 25 and started talking about you in that special voice," Grace confided during a cake tasting. "Not just any wedding, your wedding specifically." Harrison Hampton surprised everyone by requesting to give a father of the bride speech that honored both his daughter's strength and Timothy's patient devotion. "I've watched Timothy love my daughter from afar for 20 years, he told the wedding planner during venue preparation. "He's proven himself worthy of her in every way that matters." The cultural elements of their union were thoughtfully integrated throughout the planning process. The ceremony would include both traditional and contemporary elements, reflecting their shared values while honoring their different backgrounds. "I want our wedding to represent who we are together," Willow told Timothy as they designed the ceremony. "Not just merging families, but creating something new while respecting what came before." Danny took her role as maid of honor seriously, organizing a bachelorette celebration that focused on Willow's journey of self-discovery rather than the typical party format. "This isn't about saying goodbye to single life," Danny declared as she planned the weekend. "It's about celebrating the woman you've become and the love you've claimed." Samuel Root, as Timothy's best man, had similar intentions for the bachelor celebration, honoring Timothy's patience and devotion rather than mourning lost freedom. "You've been ready for this marriage since you were 20 years old," Samuel told Timothy. "This is finally your time." The wedding day dawned perfect: clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of spring morning that felt like a blessing. The Sinclair estate garden had been transformed into an elegant celebration space, with the pavilion where they'd almost kissed serving as the ceremony backdrop. Grace Sinclair cried through her morning preparations, overwhelmed by the emotion of seeing her patient prayers answered. Harrison Hampton was composed but radiant, proud to be walking his daughter toward a man who truly deserved her. Willow's wedding dress was a masterpiece. Elegant without being ostentatious, classic with contemporary touches that reflected her unique style. Unlike the dress she'd chosen for Marshall, which she now realized had been selected to please him rather than express herself, this gown made her feel beautiful and authentically herself. "You're radiant," Grace said as she fastened the vintage diamond necklace that had belonged to Timothy's grandmother. "Absolutely radiant." "I feel like myself," Willow replied, studying her reflection. "Completely, authentically myself." The ceremony was intimate and elegant, filled with family and friends who had watched their love story unfold over decades. Every detail reflected their journey, from the music selections that honored both their cultural backgrounds to the flowers that represented growth and new beginnings. When Harrison walked Willow down the aisle, she saw Timothy waiting at the altar with an expression of such joy and reverence that her heart nearly stopped. This was how it was supposed to feel, like coming home, like claiming destiny, like stepping into the life she'd always been meant to live. Grace Sinclair cried through the entire ceremony, having orchestrated seating arrangements and dinner invitations for years in hopes of bringing her son and Willow together. Harrison Hampton stood tall with tears of pride, whispering to his daughter as they approached the altar, "Your mother would have adored him." Danny served as maid of honor, her speech later praising Willow for having the courage to choose love over comfort. Samuel Root was Timothy's best man, admitting during his toast that he had been trying to convince his friend to confess his feelings for the better part of 2 decades. But the most meaningful moment came during their private vows, spoken to each other in the garden pavilion as the sun set over the celebration. "You taught me that love should make me feel more like myself, not less," Willow whispered, her hands in Timothy's. "You showed me that I deserve to be cherished, not merely tolerated. You waited 20 years for me to be ready to see what was always there. You taught me that patience is its own form of love," Timothy replied, his voice rough with emotion. "That waiting for the right person, for the right moment, for the courage to claim what belongs to you. It's all worth it when you find your home." "Are we home now?" Willow asked. "We've been home since the moment you walked into my life," Timothy said. "Everything else was just waiting for you to realize it too." The reception was a perfect blend of both families' traditions, Harrison's friends sharing stories about building businesses from nothing, Grace's circle discussing art and culture, cousins and siblings from both sides finding common ground in their love for the couple. During their first dance, Willow caught sight of her reflection in the pavilion windows. The woman looking back at her was radiant, confident, loved beyond measure, everything she had always been but had forgotten how to see. The evening included multiple moments that acknowledged their interracial union with grace and authenticity. Uncle Jerome gave a toast about love transcending all boundaries, while Grace's sister shared a poem about families growing through love rather than just blood. "Love doesn't know color," Timothy's cousin Michael said during the open mic portion. "It only knows hearts that recognize each other." As the evening wound down, Willow and Timothy stole away to the garden where their story had begun 20 years earlier. 20 years, Timothy marveled, holding her close under the stars. 20 years of loving you, wondering if you could ever see me the way I saw you. "I saw you," Willow admitted. "I was just too afraid to believe someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like me, patient, devoted, completely head over heels in love, could only want someone exactly like you," Timothy said firmly. "Brilliant, beautiful, strong, compassionate, and absolutely magnificent. 1 year later, Timothy found Willow in their shared home office late one evening, working on expansion plans for the Asian markets. She was wearing one of his shirts over silk pajamas, her hair piled loosely on top of her head, completely absorbed in her strategy documents. Their home was a perfect blend of both their styles, Timothy's appreciation for clean lines and modern art combined with Willow's love of rich textures and family photographs. It was a space that felt authentically theirs, created together rather than imposed by either personality. "You're beautiful when you're plotting world domination," he said from the doorway. "Just European and Asian markets," she replied with a smile. "I'll save the rest of the world for next year." Timothy crossed the room to stand behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders to massage the tension from her neck. "How are you feeling about the fertility appointment tomorrow?" They had been trying to conceive for 8 months, working with Dr. Chen to manage Willow's PCOS while optimizing their chances. Unlike her experience with Marshall, this journey felt hopeful rather than shameful. Timothy's love never wavered based on test results or treatment timelines. Nervous. Excited. Grateful, Willow admitted, leaning back against his chest. "Grateful that whatever happens, I know you love me completely. I will love you completely whether we have 1 child, 6 children, or no children," Timothy said firmly. "Our worth as a couple isn't determined by our reproductive success. I know. That's what makes this feel possible, knowing that you see me as complete exactly as I am." The fertility journey had included both challenges and victories. Some months brought disappointment, others brought hope. But through it all, Timothy's support never wavered, and Willow's sense of self-worth remained intact. Dr. Chen said the new treatment approach is showing promising results, Timothy reminded her gently. "But even if it doesn't work immediately, we have other options. And if none of them work? Then we'll explore adoption, surrogacy, or simply being the amazing aunt and uncle to all our friends' children." Timothy pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "Our love doesn't require biological children to be complete." This attitude, treating fertility as one of many paths to family rather than the only measure of their relationship's success, continued to heal wounds Marshall had inflicted years earlier. Timothy pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "You smell divine," he murmured. "Like vanilla and home and everything that matters." As Willow melted into her husband's embrace, surrounded by the evidence of her professional success and anchored by his unwavering love, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Chapter 14. 2 years after the wedding, the call came on a Tuesday morning in March, while Willow was reviewing quarterly reports and Timothy was making breakfast in their sun-filled kitchen. "Mrs. Sinclair?" Dr. Chen's voice carried barely contained excitement. "I have wonderful news. Your pregnancy test is positive, and your hormone levels look excellent." Willow sat in stunned silence for a moment, the phone trembling in her hand. After 18 months of trying, multiple treatment adjustments, and careful management of her PCOS symptoms, it had finally happened. "Willow?" Timothy was at her side immediately, having sensed the importance of the call. "What is it?" "We're pregnant," she whispered, then louder with growing joy, "We're pregnant." Timothy's whoop of joy could probably be heard 3 blocks away. He swept her into his arms and spun her around their kitchen, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. "I told you," he said, setting her down and cupping her face gently. "I told you that you were complete exactly as you are, and this just proves it." The pregnancy progressed beautifully under Dr. Chen's careful monitoring. Willow's PCOS symptoms were well managed, her stress levels remained low thanks to Timothy's unwavering support, and her overall health was excellent. PCOS can actually become more manageable during pregnancy for some women, Dr. Chen explained during one of their visits. "Your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do." The professional front remained equally successful. Hampton Industries' Asian expansion had exceeded all projections, establishing the company as a truly global presence. Sinclair Corporation had developed groundbreaking renewable energy partnerships throughout Europe. Both companies thrived under their respective leadership while maintaining their beneficial consulting relationship. "We make a pretty good team," Timothy observed during a strategy session where they were analyzing market opportunities in South America. "The best," Willow agreed, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach where their future was growing. Harrison Hampton, now 78, remained actively involved in Hampton Industries while gradually transitioning more responsibility to Willow. His pride in his daughter's accomplishments, both professional and personal, was evident to everyone around him. "I always knew you were destined for greatness," he told Willow during one of their weekly father-daughter lunches. "But watching you choose love and build a life that honors all parts of yourself, that's been the greatest joy of my life." Grace Sinclair had embraced her role as Willow's second mother with enthusiasm and genuine affection. When the pregnancy was announced, her joy was boundless. "I've been waiting to be a grandmother for 40 years, she declared, immediately beginning to plan the nursery and research the best baby equipment. "This child is going to be so loved." 6 months later the baby shower was held in the same garden where Willow and Timothy had married, where they'd almost kissed 20 years earlier, where their love story had quietly begun. The celebration brought together all the people who had supported their journey. Family, friends, colleagues who had watched them overcome obstacles and build something beautiful together. Danny, now promoted to Vice President of Operations at Hampton Industries, gave a speech about watching Willow transform from a woman who doubted her worth to one who claimed her destiny. "You taught all of us that settling for less than we deserve isn't noble, it's self-betrayal," Danny said, raising her glass. "Thank you for showing us what it looks like to choose ourselves and claim the love we deserve." Grace and Harrison had become unlikely co-conspirators in grandparent preparation, bonding over their shared excitement for the arrival of their grandchild. Watching them plan together, Harrison's practical business mind complementing Grace's artistic sensibilities, warmed Willow's heart. "Our families are really becoming one family," Willow observed to Timothy as they watched their parents debate baby furniture styles. "They always were," Timothy replied. "We were just too afraid to see it." The gifts at the shower reflected the multicultural richness of their combined families. Traditional African American quilts from Willow's aunts, Italian family recipes from Grace's sisters, children's books in multiple languages from Timothy's business associates, and practical baby gear from their international colleagues. Most meaningful was the joint gift from Harrison and Grace, a custom-made rocking chair crafted from wood taken from both family estates, symbolizing the blending of their legacies. For the midnight feedings and the quiet moments, Grace explained with tears in her eyes. "Every family needs a place where love is rocked to sleep." Chapter 15. Emma Grace Sinclair arrived on a crisp autumn morning, 3 weeks early but perfectly healthy. The labor was manageable thanks to Dr. Chen's excellent prenatal care and Willow's overall health improvements over the past 3 years. Timothy was an exceptional birth partner. Calm, supportive, completely focused on Willow's needs throughout the process. When Emma finally arrived, his tears of joy were immediate and unashamed. "She's perfect," he whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. "Absolutely perfect, just like her mother." Emma had Timothy's hazel eyes and Willow's delicate features, a beautiful blend of both her parents. But more importantly, she was healthy, alert, and clearly destined to be adored by an extended family that had been waiting years for her arrival. "She's beautiful," Harrison said when he met his granddaughter, his voice thick with emotion. "She looks exactly like Willow did as a baby." Grace was equally smitten, immediately claiming her role as the grandmother who would spoil Emma with art supplies and cultural experiences. "This little girl is going to change the world," Grace declared, gently stroking Emma's tiny hand. "I can see it in her eyes already." The days following Emma's birth were a revelation for Willow. Motherhood felt natural and right, despite all of Marshall's psychological conditioning that had made her doubt her maternal capabilities. Her body had done exactly what it was designed to do, PCOS and all. "You were meant to be a mother," Timothy observed as he watched Willow nursing Emma with calm confidence. Look how naturally this comes to you. I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for her, Willow admitted. Not just for a baby, but for her specifically. The professional transitions continued seamlessly. Willow took a carefully planned maternity leave, with Danny stepping into expanded responsibilities and Timothy providing strategic consulting as needed. Hampton Industries continued to thrive under the leadership structure they developed. It's amazing how much more efficient meetings become when you know you need to be home for feeding time, Willow laughed during one of her check-in calls with the office. 1 year after Emma's birth, as Willow reflected on her journey during Emma's first birthday celebration, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. For years earlier, she had been a successful but insecure woman trapped in a relationship that systematically destroyed her confidence. Now, she was a thriving CEO, beloved wife, confident mother, and woman who knew her worth completely. The birthday party was held at their home, filled with family and friends who had supported their journey. Emma was a happy, healthy toddler who clearly adored both her parents and basked in the attention of her extended family. "Look at what we built," Timothy said as they watched Emma playing with her cousins while surrounded by grandparents, aunts, uncles, and family friends. "Not just our marriage or our family, but this whole community of love." "We didn't build it," Willow corrected gently. "We claimed it. It was always here waiting for us to be brave enough to reach for it." The guest list included people who represented every phase of Willow's journey. Danny, who had supported her through the darkest period with Marshall; Dr. Chen, who had helped her reclaim her health; Dr. Rodriguez, who had guided her healing from emotional abuse; colleagues who had watched her professional transformation, and family members who had loved her through every challenge. Notably absent was any trace of Marshall or the toxicity he had represented. His chapter in her life was completely closed, replaced by authentic love and genuine partnership. "I've been thinking about the advice I'd give to women going through what I went through," Willow told Grace as they watched Emma toddling around the garden. "What would you tell them?" Grace asked. "That settling for less than you deserve isn't noble, it's self-betrayal. That love should make you feel more like yourself, not less. That anyone trying to convince you otherwise has ulterior motives." Willow paused, watching Timothy swing Emma in the air while she giggled with delight. "And that sometimes the love you've been searching for has been waiting patiently nearby all along." 5 years after Emma's birth, the family portrait session was being held in the same garden where Willow and Timothy had married, where they'd almost kissed as teenagers, where Emma now played among the flowers while her parents watched with hearts full of gratitude. Emma, now a precocious 5-year-old, had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's patience, along with the confidence that comes from being unconditionally loved. She attended the same progressive preschool where diversity was celebrated and different family structures were honored. "Mama, why do you and Daddy look at each other like that?" Emma asked during a quiet moment, her child's perception noting the obvious love between her parents. "Like what, sweetheart?" Willow asked, settling Emma on her lap. "Like you have a secret that makes you happy," Emma said seriously. Timothy and Willow exchanged one of those looks Emma had noticed, full of shared history, inside jokes, and deep contentment. "Our secret is that we're exactly where we're supposed to be," Timothy told his daughter. "With exactly the people we're supposed to be with. And that it took us a very long time to figure that out," Willow added, kissing Emma's forehead. The professional landscape had continued to evolve. Hampton Industries was now recognized as one of the most innovative international trade companies globally, with Willow frequently invited to speak at conferences about strategic thinking and adaptive leadership. Sinclair Corporation had become a leader in sustainable business practices, with Timothy's insights sought by companies worldwide. Their consulting relationship had evolved into a model for how businesses could collaborate without losing their individual identities. Several business schools used their partnership structure as a case study in maintaining family legacies while embracing innovation. "We've created something unique," Timothy observed during one of their strategy sessions. "Individual excellence that's enhanced by partnership." "The best of both worlds," Willow agreed. Just like our marriage. Harrison Hampton, now in his early 80s, remained sharp and engaged, serving as chairman emeritus of Hampton Industries while Willow handled day-to-day operations. His pride in his daughter's accomplishments, both professional and personal, was evident to everyone who knew them. "You exceeded every dream I had for you," he told Willow during one of their weekly lunches. "Not just in business, but in life. You chose love, built a family, and stayed true to yourself. That's real success." Grace Sinclair had embraced her role as Emma's cultural guide, taking her to museums, art galleries, and concerts while sharing stories about family history and the importance of curiosity about the world. "Grandma Grace says I can be anything I want to be," Emma reported after one of their adventures. "Even an astronaut who paints pictures." "Grandma Grace is absolutely right," Willow assured her daughter. "You can be anything you dream of being." The PCO's journey had reached a place of complete acceptance and management. Willow worked with Dr. Chen to maintain her health while serving as an advocate for other women with the condition. She frequently spoke at medical conferences about the importance of treating PCOS as a manageable health condition rather than a source of shame. "PCOS doesn't define us," she told an audience of healthcare providers. "With proper support and education, women with PCOS can live exactly the lives they choose: successful careers, loving relationships, families if they want them, complete fulfillment on their own terms." The marriage had deepened into something that felt both comfortable and exciting, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. They still consulted each other on business decisions, still laughed at each other's jokes, still felt electricity when their hands touched. "You know what I love most about our relationship?" Timothy asked one evening as they sat on their back porch watching Emma play in the garden. "What's that?" "That we're still discovering new things about each other. After all these years of friendship and 5 years of marriage, you still surprise me." "Good surprises, I hope," Willow said, settling against his side. "The best surprises. Like how you sing to yourself when you're reviewing contracts, or how you always touch your engagement ring when you're thinking about difficult decisions, or how you tear up every time Emma accomplishes something new." Speaking of Emma accomplishing new things, Willow said with a smile, "She's been asking about siblings." Timothy's expression brightened with interest. "And what have you been telling her?" "That families grow in their own time, in their own way, and that love is what makes a family complete, not the number of people in it." "Very wise. And what do you think about the possibility?" Willow looked out at their daughter, playing contentedly in the garden where love had bloomed over decades, surrounded by the evidence of everything they'd built together. "I think we should see what the future brings," she said contentedly. "We've gotten pretty good at trusting the process." As the sun set over their garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had learned that settling for less than you deserve isn't noble, it's self-betrayal. That love should amplify your best qualities, not highlight your perceived flaws. That worthiness isn't something you earn through perfection, but something you claim through courage. Most importantly, she had discovered that sometimes the love you've been searching for has been waiting patiently nearby all along, seeing your value when you couldn't see it yourself, ready to celebrate the extraordinary woman you've always been. The future stretched ahead filled with possibilities, more children perhaps, new business ventures, adventures with Timothy, the simple joy of being cherished by someone who understood her completely. It was a future built on authentic love, mutual respect, and the unshakable knowledge that she was worthy of everything she'd ever dreamed of having. It was the life she'd always deserved but had finally found the courage to claim. What moment in your life helped you discover your true worth? We'd love to hear about the person or experience that helped you see yourself clearly. Share your story in the comments below and let's celebrate these life-changing recognitions together. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for more tales of love conquering self-doubt and the courage to choose yourself. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story about women discovering their power and claiming the love they deserve. Tell us in the comments, what do you think is the most important quality in a life partner? We believe it's someone who sees your magnificence even when you can't see it yourself. Remember, beautiful souls, you are worthy of love that celebrates you, not love that diminishes you. You deserve someone who sees your strengths and encourages them, not someone who makes you doubt your worth. Trust your instincts, choose your value, and never settle for less than the extraordinary love that recognizes how magnificent you truly are. Until tomorrow's story unfolds in our diary of love, remember that somewhere out there, your perfect love story is waiting to begin. Sometimes it's with someone new, and sometimes it's with someone who's been patiently loving you all along, waiting for you to be ready to see it.